Hello, this is a feedback video covering the answers that you gave me to this question, which I'm sure you'll all remember. So you've got to start with the question. You've got to start by analysing the way the question has been put together. And of course, you've got to recognise that what they're giving you is an interpretation. It is a view, and they're asking you to discuss this view of Nazi Germany between 1933 and 1939. It is just one view. They could have given you 100 different views, but they chose this one because they've embedded some stuff in it that they want you to decipher and dig out and discuss. And they've put it together quite deliberately. And they're testing whether you can see what they can see. Can you understand it the way they understand it? They may have set a trap for you. And we've talked before about how they will deliberately exaggerate certain things, and they're testing to see whether you can spot what's wrong with this view. So you do not have to share this view. In fact, you probably shouldn't share this view. You should be able to find things to disagree with in it. It's one of the tests that they've set for you is, can you spot what they have done with this quote? Now, some people at some schools not too far away from this one won't be able to see what's wrong with that quote. They won't be able to see anything that there is to disagree with or argue. So you've got to set yourselves apart from them. They're asking you about two different things. Remember, they could just have said a period of limited social change or a period of limited economic change, but they've lumped both together. So they expect you to separate them and deal with them both. So think about these two spectra, and bear in mind, of course, that at one end there'll be no change at all, absolutely nothing changed, and at the other end everything changed. There was complete change in economics and complete change in society. Now, of course, in the middle there'll be some sort of moderate change, but there are also other degrees, and what they're asking you, of course, is whether you would agree that everything fell within this range of only limited change in society and economics. That's what they're asking you about. And of course, a Pakistani grammar school girl, she gets that straight away. She doesn't even need to think about it very much. Now, we know, because we've been studying it for a while, that it's not true that everything fell in that range of limited change. There were some things that barely changed at all and some things that changed quite profoundly. There were some things that changed but only affected a handful of people, and there were some things that changed and affected just about everybody. There were some things that changed which were really, really quite important in society, and other things that were barely that barely mattered at all. They were quite superficial. So that's what they're testing, and that's what you've got to try to show some awareness of. Now, how you choose to disagree with the statement is up to you. It could be that you see it as a period of limited change, where you're going to be talking about social and economic stuff, but really you're talking about the period of change. Could be that you choose to focus on the dates, and you choose to think about it as a period or different periods within those dates. Could be that you choose to focus on social and economic, and whether those changes were limited or not. Could be that you focus on the and bit and say, actually, the amount of change in society was not the same as the amount of change in economics. Any of those is going to be fine, but you've got to make sure you address the question directly. So if you've got a little one in the margin of your essay, what it means is you probably aren't doing this well enough at that point. So the question contains a view. You're supposed to challenge it. What you've got to do is establish what your challenge is, preferably from the very beginning, and keep it going throughout the whole essay. So look at your essay, look at where there's a 1 in the margin, and think about this. Rewatch this section of the video if you like. Maybe rewrite a sentence to see if you can make your challenge clearer. So instead of saying it's true to a certain extent, and instead of talking quite vaguely about some things and other things, or instead of talking in quite abstract terms, try and be specific. So remember that your default is yes, up to a point, yes, to a certain extent. So that's your default. That's you've already got that in mind without even needing to really think about the question. So don't let that be the only thing you write. If that's your default, see if you can go beyond it. So try to be specific. The question's asking you specifically about social and economic change, so try and be at least as specific as that, rather than just talking generally about change. So here's a suggestion on screen as to how you can be a bit more specific. Here's another one about how you can be a bit more specific if you're going to approach it from the point of view of the periodization. So again, have a look, see if you can rewrite your sentence to make it more precise, more specific, and clearer what your challenge is. If you've got a 2 in your essay margins, then it means that you have started to lose sight of the question as the essay went on, and you're not continuing to address the question throughout. So the question asks about changes, social and economic changes. And so one of the things I'm looking for when I read your essay is lots and lots of reference to change. You could probably look back through your essay and count how many times you use the word change or synonyms for change, and look at where they are in your essay. So you could highlight all of the times you mention change and look at where they are. It could be that you've got lots of them in introduction and conclusion, but not much throughout the rest of the essay. Ideally, what you're looking for is changes 3 times per paragraph, once at the top, once in the middle, and once at the end. If you've got a 3 in your essay, it means that your second sentences aren't strong enough. Your second sentences should take your point forward, not backwards. So no one actually wrote this example. I'm just using this example to prove a point. So first sentence makes a point about the NSV and the fundraising drives. And then the second sentence goes back to the Middle Ages. Now, we could have gone back to Jesus' mum or the Big Bang. I decided that wasn't necessary. But we've got a second sentence that takes us way, way, way back into the background, far too far back. Instead, your second sentence should take you forward. So make sure that that second sentence in time and in the way it advances your argument moves forward rather than backwards. This wasn't a big problem, but it did strike me as being quite important for those people who made this mistake. Some of you are saying there's a big change in some areas and a small change in other areas, and so you're averaging them out and saying overall there's a moderate amount of change, because big plus small changes means that overall the average is probably a medium amount of change. But of course, that's not really how it works, is it? A big change plus a small change is an even bigger change. So don't be tempted to generalize too much so that you actually generalize yourself out of your argument. Right. If you've got a 5, and lots of you will have a 5, it's because you're not focused enough on the changes. So here's an example paragraph which is based on, I corrected a few bits and pieces, but it's based on a paragraph in one of the essays, and you can see there's lots of reference to change. Lots of reference to change. Look at the top, look at the middle, and look at the bottom of the paragraph. There's lots of change throughout. Actually, aside from the highlighted references to change, lots of other parts of the paragraph become points about change, even though they're not actually using the word change or effects. So any policy that's referred to, if it's surrounded by reference to change, it's obvious from the context of the paragraph that what you're referring to is something being introduced, something that's new, something that's different, and therefore it's clear that you are focused on changes. But if we were to remove those sentences with the red and the pink, if we're to remove the reference to the changes, then really all you've got left is a narrative of the policies. And this is a bad thing. But you can see that all I've done is deleted those sentences with the red and the pink. And what we're left with is just a description of what happened. So it's those sentences with the references to change that make the outline of the policies much more useful, much more credit-worthy. If you've got a 6, it's because I've got the strong sense that your paragraphs don't fit together. They are 4 or 5 paragraphs which are on the same pieces of paper in the same handwriting, but apart from that, they don't have too much to do with each other. Your paragraph should work as a team. Think about how a good team is put together out of different components, different parts that all play a slightly different role, but add up to something which is rounded, whole, and well functioning together. So think about how your paragraphs fit together. Look at the first sentences of all of your paragraphs. If you've got a 6, that means I don't get a strong sense of how it fits together. If you've got a 6A, it probably means that you're just ranking. And often a ranking was good enough in the 4th form or the 5th form, maybe even the 6th form, but we all know it's a bit arbitrary. You just choose one to write about first and you say first because it's the first one you're writing about. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's first in any other way. Some of you, if you've got a 6B, you're doing what I call flattening. In other words, you're saying they're all equally important. And so you just say, this is important, this is important, this is also important, and furthermore, this is also important. And so there's no real sense of how they fit together, how they relate together. So 6A and 6B are almost equally bad. 6C I call a sort of schizophrenic approach, where you go for the first half of the essay saying that there was no change or there was limited change, and then in the second half of the essay you have a complete change of approach, change of direction, and you start saying that there were huge changes. Well, how can you have no change and huge change at the same time? Well, you've got to make sure that your paragraphs fit together so that they are not just playing the same instrument, louder and louder and louder, or like a team where all of the players are the same or interchangeable. You need to think about how they fit and how each one plays a different part in the argument. If you've got a 7, it means that you're giving me the impression that the facts just speak for themselves. All you need to do is put in some big numbers and it will convey an argument in itself. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So look back at the section on 5 and think about how you can make the facts work for you, make the facts fit into your argument. And one way to do this is to think about 3 by 3. So 3 examples through the paragraph with 3 sentence explanations. So the red bits here are the 3 examples. And now let's have a look at how they're built with 3 sentence explanation units. So the black bit there is the first sentence. The red bit is the example, and then the blue bit is the third sentence. So we've got an introduction, some evidence, and a mini conclusion within a paragraph, and you should be aiming to do that 3 times. Don't overstate your points. If you've got an 8, it means that I felt like you were exaggerating slightly. So here's an example from one sentence in one essay, which was a pretty strong example, but some of you are doing something similar to this. So abundantly transparent. Well, abundantly means extremely or plentifully. Transparent means it's possible to see through it, or so that something can be seen distinctly through the thing. Essentially, if you're saying it's extremely and plentifully easy to perceive distinctly that the changes were limited, well, then there's no point in going any further, is there? What you're saying to Cambridge is you've written a stupid question because there's nothing to disagree with. It's extremely clear that it is correct to say that there was limited change. So Cambridge don't think that that's true, otherwise they would have set you a different essay question. And the fact that you've written 5 pages about this suggests that even you don't think it's true. So don't overstate it, don't exaggerate it. Equally, don't understate or avoid stating. So some of you are saying it could be argued, it can be seen, which is really you just trying to avoid expressing an opinion or sitting on the fence. That third one, arguably indisputable, I'll just leave you to think about that one for a minute. I don't think it's possible for it to be arguably indisputable. If it's arguable, it's disputable. If it's indisputable, you can't argue it. If you've got a 9, it means the first sentences in your main paragraphs the first words in the first sentences of your main paragraphs are offensive to me. So the following are now banned. I don't mean to say that you cannot use these words at all in an essay, but you cannot use them as the first word in a first sentence in a paragraph, because they're not doing what you think they're doing. These words are conjunctions. In other words, they join two ideas, which means they have to go in the middle of something. You're putting them at the start of a paragraph. So you're trying to use them as a joining word between two ideas, but there's no idea coming first, because the previous idea, the first idea, came in a different paragraph, and that's bad form, so stop doing it. Don't make a claim without explaining. If you've got a number 10, this is what it means. So in other words, you're saying that something was a big change, but you're not really explaining why it was a big change. And point 11, if you've got an 11, it means that really you're just outlining the policies, you're just describing what happened. If this is the case, look back at 5 and 7 and have a go at rewriting and see if you can improve your paragraphs. Overall though, pretty good, well done. But room for improvement for everybody, and I hope this video helps you to figure out what you need to do better next time. As always, the most useful thing you can do is to rewrite something you've already written. So why don't you even take one sentence and try and rewrite it to improve on it on the basis of this feedback. If you can do more than one sentence, do a paragraph. If you can do more than one paragraph, do 2 or 3 paragraphs. And if you're really keen, you could have another go at an essay, maybe a different essay rather than this one. You could choose a similar essay and see if you could improve on your style in that. But if you want to rewrite the same essay, feel free. I hope that helps.